I put out a notice through the app.
Okay. Should be live on YouTube as well. Stream settings look good. Excellent connection. Yeah, we're ready to go.
I'll let you know when I see it on. There it goes. There we are.
Awesome. Should we give it another couple minutes for people to trickle in?
Yep. Let me get centered to the camera and look like I'm falling off the edge.
Whoever's on now, let us know if you can get our audio clearly.
It's just me and you right now. And I heard audio because I forgot to mute my YouTube page, so I heard us in the background. So we'll give it a minute or two. Middle of June, and it's going to be lightly attended. Everybody's got better things to do than
slow time.
Get the big pearls of wisdom I'm about to deal out.
Okay, why don't we, should we dive right in, just let people come in as they do?
Adjust my camera just a hair. See why there we go. I'm like falling off the edge of the screen. And it's not, maybe it's on me.
Okay.
Back to me.
There you go. A little more center now.
It's great podcasting. Me trying to center myself.
Yeah, first minute on positioning. Okay. Well, RC, we're starting to get
what's
people
up with my camera. And I apologize for that. I'm going to give it one more nudge. It's like that in a mirror effect where left is right and right is left. I'm not getting it correct. I'm way off the page. I'm going to get there. I will figure this out eventually. The first hour may be me trying to center myself on camera. That's the opening news.
Well,
that's the opening segment.
You're getting more
off the other edge.
the more you adjust, the more viewers are trickling in, so I think people are entertained by you.
This is we're on to something here.
Yeah, there you go. Okay.
Tuesday night camera adjustment night.
Yeah, you're centered now.
I think I'm good.
Yeah, you're good. So, well, thanks for everybody joining on. RC, you wanted to hit off a bunch of topics, and before we do, you want to give the audience an update with everything going on with FF Metrics?
Obviously, it's somewhat light football news time, but I have a couple of little nuggets to share from some discussions, from looking at some OTA tape. Then we'll take any of the questions and comments in the chat. I am diligently working to put the finishing touches on the draft guide, which is maybe 2 days away at best, 3 days away probably, is the right thing. I'm trying to get it done before the weekend, which looks like it's going to be achievable. So I've gone through all 32 teams now, spent a day with all of them, and I've adjusted some win totals for the future computer simulated seasons, adjusted projections. So my whole world is spinning right now with fake things that I think are going to happen in my head for the upcoming season. So I'm ready for the season to start because I want to see it all play out now. So, but there'll be 9 million changes between now and August and the first week of preseason and the first week of the regular season. So, but we're almost there. We're almost ready for draft guide time.
Yep. And RC, with that, let's jump into the first topic of the day. You wanted to address the Denver QB situation. Obviously, last year, Russell Wilson was their starter. He left in the offseason. Denver cut him. They started, I believe, Jarrett Stidham towards the end of the year, and obviously drafted Bo Nix. RC, what are you seeing here?
We talked about one of these quarterbacks very briefly before the show started. But if I asked you your gut feeling on who the starter is likely to be for week one, and then what do you think the hierarchy of the three quarterbacks that are there are, who do you think is going to be the week one starter for whatever reason you think it, and who do you think will be 2 and 3?
I think that it's going to be Bo Nix starting just because this is sort of Peyton's guy that he picked out. So I think he's going to have a leg up on the competition. He's an older QB too, so I feel like he might have less of a learning curve than like probably as Zach Wilson did. Oddly enough, he's on that roster when he came out of college. So I would peg him at 1. And then I'm sort of like 2A and 2B between Stidham and Wilson. I don't really have a gut feel on that. I could see Wilson getting in at the backup quarterback. But if you just asked me who would be ready to go from week one, who I think is the most ready to just help them win, I'd probably lean on Zach Wilson just given his experience. But RC, what do you think?
When the whole process started of who's going to be the starting quarterback happened after Denver drafted Bo Nix, I would have thought the day after the draft, I would have said this is going to be Jarrett Stidham starting, of which Sean Payton said he was the number one to start camp. That it would have been probably Bo Nix number 2, but it could have been Zach Wilson while they kept Bo Nix under wraps and let him develop and kind of use this as a learning year or a redshirt year, and then maybe he'd take over halfway into the season if things went south. Then over the last couple weeks, I started getting on the train that you're feeling from all the conversations, all the reports that I see from every corner, mainstream to my good sources. Everybody's of the same mindset now. Is like, this is going to be Bo Nix. Like, this almost can't be. The way that Sean Payton's going about his work and the things that he's saying and doing, it is going to be Bo Nix, very likely the week one starter. The second part of that is that's I've hit on that in notes the last couple weeks, and I think a lot of people are sensing that's going there. But the little wrinkle that I wasn't aware of is that Zach Wilson, to my more trusted sources, they expect Zach Wilson to be the number 2, and that it's possible that they're going to cut Jarrett Stidham or trade him before having to make the 53-man roster. That's where the quarterback situation is headed. I would have, right after the draft, I wouldn't have seen that coming. I thought he was going to start Jarrett Stidham, but Stidham is now more on his way out the door than he is towards starting. And not that he's done anything bad per se, but Nix is Sean Payton's love child, and I think he has a spot in his heart for Zach Wilson too. Additionally, what I wasn't taken into consideration, and I should have back a couple months ago, Jarrett Stidham's contract is very cut me type of. It's like if he makes the roster, they'd have to pay him $10 million or $7 million or something like that. But if they cut him, they just owe him 1 and he's gone. So I don't think we're going to see Jarrett Stidham there. I think it's going to be a Nix Wilson 1-2 punch, and maybe Stidham on a redone contract, but I'm sure he'll he'll not want to re-sign there because he knows there's no chance of him starting. He can just sit out and wait for an injury or wait for some situation to blow up somewhere. So just putting that out there for all the Knicks owners. If you were trying to pair Stidham with Knicks to have the quarterbacks for the season, I don't know that we're going to get there on that. I think it's going to be Knicks Wilson.
And RC, I don't know how you feel about this, but if Knicks doesn't hit, Sean Payton goes on the hottest of hot seats, right? Because he pretty much goes in there, cuts Wilson, and Denver is pretty much paying the guy like $80 million in like dead cap space or whatever. They're for sure covering $40 million, like close to $40 million of his salary next year, and I think they have a dead cap hit of $30 million the following year. So like, you just look at that, and if Knicks is a bust, if he's a Bryce Young type of QB, I think Payton could be on his way out in one. I mean, a QB probably buys you 2 to 3 years, right? But if he just looks horrendous, I mean, Sean Payton's going to flame out really quickly.
I would say if he looks horrendous, then Sean Payton's on the hottest of hot seats. I just don't think Knicks is not as bad as Bryce Young is. So there'll be some kind of hope. If Knicks struggles, there'll be some kind of hope that his year 2 will be better and they'll buy Sean Payton the second year. But if it's bad, whatever the definition, whatever that means, whatever bad means, if it's bad, then Sean Payton's going to look like a fool.
RC, I'm probably getting off topic here, and I promise I'll get to the next thing, but I want to
the whole
dovetail to something
about that. Getting off topic.
Is there any first-round QB in this year's draft that is worse than Bryce Young? So meaning, would you take Bryce Young over anybody in this draft?
Over anybody or any first round?
Any first-round QB. Let's start with that.
No.
So you would take JJ McCarthy over Bryce Young if you were starting a franchise? Wow.
Yep.
That's insane. I mean, I have JJ McCarthy pretty low, so the fact that like
I don't like JJ McCarthy, I don't.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I would take him before I took Bryce. There's nothing with Bryce. I mean, there's no foot. At least with JJ McCarthy, he could game manage me. But he's also got some decent speed and some decent size to him. So he with his 125-yard passing game, he might also be able to scramble out of the pocket a couple times and maybe get a first down or spare a sack for a 2-yard gain because he's got some feet to him. Bryce Young doesn't have any feet and he doesn't have any size, so he goes down if anybody sneezes on him, on top of being a bad NFL quarterback. So McCarthy has got a lot of Bryce Young traits, but McCarthy's got a better arm, a better everything, tools-wise.
That's wild. Let's move to the next topic. Apparently there's some trouble brewing in Philadelphia. RC, what are you hearing from your sources? I don't think I caught wind of that in the mainstream unless I missed something.
I'm not going to swear or sign off on this. I'm just going to share it. And one of the notes, one of the players I'm going to talk about, you've seen, everybody's seen kind of little throwaway notes on that Jalen Hurts is not having a great early practices or OTAs. And I'm looking at my notes to make sure I get all of the players, that I talk about all the players, and I get the headline information right. But according to my source, that I'm not going to back to the hilt, but they're pretty secure on it, or they're pretty positive on. Yes, there seems to be some type of Jalen Hurts issue in general with the new offense, that there's a Kellen Moore issue going on, that they're changing the entire offense. Jalen Hurts is not happy about it. They're struggling to kind of get it going. And in reality, that doesn't mean anything when they get to, by the time they get to the games, preseason games in August, or get to the real games, they could be totally fine. But as of right now, there is something to this whole Jalen Hurts is not talking positively when asked something about Nick Sirianni. Hurts not looking good, not looking energized or active in the offense, these OTAs, and that Kenny Pickett, by contrast, they keep saying he looks better. And my source was saying, yeah, he does look better, but he's they also tend to work with the twos a little bit more. But Kenny Pickett's running around like a guy that has something that's pissed and has something to prove, and he's trying to show that he's a legit NFL player because obviously that's all in question now. So there's a spark and a fire going on with Pickett where Hurts, who has a tendency to look like he's half asleep anyway, is really kind of dragging his ass around and not really excited about Kellen Moore, which got me to thinking about Kellen Moore. Like, Dak was not great with Kellen Moore for 2 seasons, and then the second they get rid of Kellen Moore, Dak has one of his best seasons ever last year. And then Kellen Moore definitely didn't, do anything overly impressive with the Chargers, and obviously that whole group got wiped out. So now you're getting Kellen Moore thrust on Jalen Hurts, and does Kellen Moore have an offense built for Jalen Hurts? Like, what is Nick Sirianni doing? Why is he letting Kellen Moore completely change the offense? So apparently there is something to the Hurts kind of not being happy, but the real twist, what I had not heard before, take it with a grain of salt, is people are getting a little agitated with their Messiah Saquon Barkley in the practices, that he's not really showing a whole lot of energy or fire or anything. Not that I mean, you can be. I was watching some tape of my new favorite team, the Tennessee Titans, in OTAs, and was watching just various things, just observing what was going on and who was in what rotations and all that. And DeAndre Hopkins looks like he's going half speed, like he's got better things to do on some of the just basic wide receiver drills, just like everybody line up, go out for a pass, then the next guy go out for a pass, no defense, no anything, just kind of like warm-up drills. DeAndre Hopkins looks like he'd rather be anywhere but there catching basic passes. So veteran stars can kick it down a gear in OTAs, but there's a lot of people that were expecting more from Barkley, that they gave him all this money, that they're hoping that Hurts and Barkley would be leaders of the offense and be, rah-rah and get this thing going. But Hurts is moping around, and apparently Saquon Barkley hasn't really done anything that's gotten anybody excited. Not that that's his mission or his goal in OTAs, but I just thought it was worth noting because apparently all the reports of Hurts being disappointed and frustrated have some validity, according to a source, but that it wasn't sure if Saquon was also upset about the offense or if he was just kind of kicking it down a gear because why give all that effort in OTAs, or if Saquon's just not the guy that they all thought. So my source was saying there was a lot of observers sitting around starting to talk down about Saquon, like looking at his numbers and going, man, he was really inefficient with the Giants. Maybe it wasn't the Giants. Maybe Saquon Barkley's not as good as we think. So I was just caught by a little surprise that it's turned from Saquon's the Messiah to observers kind of huddling up and going, what is going on? Like, did we make a mistake with Saquon?
That's interesting to me, RC. And the one thing I'll say is you're talking about how can Nick Sirianni let Kellen Moore just run the offense. I don't think Sirianni's all that good when it comes to X's and O's. He leans a lot. He leaned a lot on his coordinators during the Super Bowl run with Steichen and Gandon, and obviously last
And
year
yeah,
there were problems
they're
on
turning
offense
out to
and
be
defense.
great coaches.
Yeah,
And what he replaced them with was not great coaches. And now he's replaced them with another level, which Kellen Moore's potentially the Eric Bieniemy of 2024, of guy that has a name, guy that was hyped up, but in reality, you look back and go, this guy probably didn't have anything to do with these offenses. And if he did, it was dragging them down, not pumping them up.
yeah. I mean, Dallas, when Kellen Moore was there, they had a great offensive line. Their offense was clicking too. I know that Dak, and
But it wasn't as good as last
it
year's
wasn't as good as
offense.
last year. He leaves, and Dak probably has one of his better seasons. And they're, yeah, I mean, it's just, it looks like it's not going to end pretty in Philly. And I can't really put a source on it, but I've been hearing like rumblings on various podcasts that the Eagles owner and Bill Belichick have been like going out to dinners and all that stuff. So I think that when shit really hits the fan this season, that I know we talk a lot about him potentially going to the Giants, but I'd keep my eye out for Philly too. If Nick Sirianni really screws this up, I could see Bill Belichick going there in 2025.
I think there are high odds this is it for Sirianni, and he may not even make it through the season. If they get out to a slow start, I could see Sirianni and then Kellen Moore both getting bounced. And then whether it's going to be Belichick in, I like that theory. Belichick's going to land somewhere next year. The Giants are going to be the Giants will be an option. The Eagles will be an option. And if you're Belichick, you would probably want to take the Eagles job over the Giants
Do you have
job.
a QB?
But he may get more. The Giants may sign over their soul more to him. So who knows? But Belichick's going to be in a catbird seat next year.
Oh yeah,
But I
much
know
better.
this from the late season collapse to what the coordinators have gone on to do without him, and then what his team became last year, and now all these rumblings early this year. And if Philly falls flat, Sirianni is done.
Yeah, and keep in mind that the leaders of both sides of the trenches, um, Fletcher Cox and Jason Kelsey, they're both retired and gone. I mean that I know Cox probably wasn't playing at the level that he's normally accustomed to, but Kelsey was there. Kelsey was playing at a pretty high level last year, so losing him is going to be a big piece, and you lose both like leaders on the line, offensive and defensive lines. Like it looks like the arrow is pointing down in Philly. I wish that Dallas was a little stronger so I could back them. I don't see that there, but maybe there's another team that could potentially come in and dethrone Philly and or Dallas. RC, let's move to I think this is a good segue to our next topic. Jaden Daniels, obviously the Commanders' new QB, taken second overall. Apparently, he's developing a connection with somebody in camp that you're hearing about. And to just give the audience some update on the Commanders, I know a lot of things happened this offseason. Obviously, the draft, free agency, you can lose track easily. They lost Logan Thomas. They bring in Zach Ertz at tight end. For the running back position, now they have Austin Eckler. And in the receiving room, you still have Jahan Dotson and Scary Terry, but you also have Luke McCaffrey, Christian McCaffrey's brother. RC, what are you hearing? Are one of these guys Daniels' go-to target in camp and off-season?
You know, by virtue of the question, that it's not going to be Terry McLaurin. I would never do that to everybody and state the obvious. Like, I'm not going to come on and go, guess who the Raiders' number one target is in practices. So I'm going to turn it to you to guess. If you have one guess for $1 million, you'll get it right. You'll get the million if you get it right. 0 if you lose it. If you miss it, who do you think I'm going to say or report back that Jaden Daniels has reportedly from a source that I do have some trust in, is seeming like Jaden's favorite target.
I'm going to assume that Jaden didn't come in right away and start running with the ones. So
I think
that
he did.
he did. Oh, okay. Never mind. Well, regardless, I'm going to go with Luke McCaffrey just because I'm high on him and I want that to happen. Is that
The alternative for Washington would have been to start OTAs and everything with Marcus Mariota as the starter. That did not happen, as Jaden Daniels has been number one all along. You say Luke McCaffrey, so you are still not a millionaire. It is Zach Ertz
Zach Ertz?
that is developing an early relationship with Jaden Daniels, and I can't say this with my own two eyes, I'm just taking information from a source, that Ertz physically looks fine. Like, if anybody has any question about him being too old, but he's in the same age range as Travis Kelce, that Ertz is moving around fine. You're coming off a nagging injury that he had last year that he missed some time with, and then Arizona fell out of the playoffs, so they cut Ertz to do him a favor because they couldn't trade him. So they cut him to let him rehab and find a contender to sign with to finish out the year, so because he was going to hit free agency, and they certainly weren't going to re-sign him. So he got over his nagging injury, and Washington signed him, and apparently that is going better than anybody would have thought. / don't forget Zach Ertz. The reason that Austin Eckler joined Washington, when you get past the money situation, is Anthony Lynn's the running back coach there. So Anthony Lynn was the one who spawned Austin Eckler. So they have a relationship, and Eckler wanted to go there. Zach Ertz, his relationship to Washington is he was Cliff Kingsbury's close confidant in the years that they were in Arizona. Arizona went and got Zach Ertz, and Zach Ertz was in the Kingsbury era. So just putting it out there, Zach Ertz is not dead yet for fantasy football purposes.
Now, let me ask you this, RC. In a rookie QB, inexperienced QBs in general, they lead on tight ends. I see that connection. But with Eckler, the clip that always comes to mind, like from last year, was him being in the open field against Green Bay and getting like chased down by a defender where he had so much, like, Eckler of like 2 years ago would have ran that in and nobody would have even like touched him, but then he got chased down. Was he dealing with injuries last year, or is this Eckler falling off a cliff? I know that Anthony Lynn's there, but how much could we actually trust him in 2024?
No one but God is going to know the answer to that question. But there is cause to believe, there's certainly cause to believe, hey, Eckler is old, he's out of juice, we hate him, which would kind of be shocking that could all happen in 1 year, that he just go from 20 touchdowns and being a MVP candidate, offensive player of the year type of player, to total garbage 1 year later. It's not impossible, but it would just seem, with the shape that he keeps himself in, that would surprise me. And there was a lot of reasons that the Chargers were starting to fall down as a team around him, but he started off the season having a 100+ yard game, having one of his typical Austin Eckler events, but he got hurt at the end of that game. And then I think he either missed week 2 and then several weeks after that, or he tried to go in week 2 and then was out several weeks after that. Then he tried to come back, and then I believe it didn't go well, so he went out again and then came back. I think there's cause to say he tried to force himself back in off of a sprain type situation that I've seen players, and the one that always comes to my mind is Tyler Lockett from several years ago, where he sprained his MCL, and they can still go and they can still play, but they lose a lot of cutting ability. They lose a lot of juice, but they're still viable. They can still go out and play the game. They're just not themselves. And I remember Tyler Lockett having a great start to a season early in his career, then spraining his MCL, being out for a couple weeks, and then rushing himself back. And then he was back, and then people that had him for fantasy were like, "Oh, great! You know, he had such a great start. He's such a great receiver. I've been missing him. Now he came back earlier. This is awesome." But when he came back, he was nothing like himself for like 4 or 5 weeks, and then all of a sudden, about 6 weeks in, they had a bye week. It finally healed up, and then all of a sudden he was back to being Tyler Lockett. So it's possible that Eckler just tried to fight through and play with an injury, and then when he came back at the end, Justin Herbert was gone, and so was half the offensive line. The Kellen Moore special didn't launch Eckler into any type of greatness, and it's going to be a better situation potentially for him in that he's healthy and that he's sharing a backfield instead of having to carry a backfield in Washington.
Yeah.
So I'm not giving up, but I'm keenly aware he's getting to that point. You never want to get. There's so much fear that you're going to get the Dalvin Cook moment where it's like, oh, the Vikings cut Dalvin Cook. They couldn't find anybody to trade for him. And how is it that nobody wants Dalvin Cook? Man, the guy's rushing for 1,000 yards. Like, what is Minnesota doing? Why hasn't anybody signed him? Our team needs to sign him. Then the Jets give him $8 million, and you're like, oh, man, the Jets are loaded. No, he sucked. He was awful last year for the Jets. I mean, he's done. Dalvin Cook was washed and done from 1 year to the next. I saw signs of it the prior year, but he was still producing something. So it's possible Eckler can fall into that vortex, and everybody's afraid of that, and rightfully so. But people have been thinking that on Travis Kelce. There's a lot of other, this is the end for Kelce. This is the end for Mike Evans. This is the end for Keenan Allen. And it's not true. So I would say he's still, he's only 29 years old. I mean, I think he's maybe, I could be getting the player wrong, but I think he's only like a half a year older than Alvin Kamara. Nobody's running around saying Alvin Kamara's done or Joe Mixon is done, but 6 months of age and everybody thinks Eckler is done. So I lean that that's not true. And I know he's one of the most supreme physically conditioned running backs in the NFL and has been for years. So could be he's out of juice, but I think there's cause to believe that he's not. And I'm on the side of that he's not. What he's going to get out of this offense and the role and all of that is all up for debate, but I don't think he's dead yet.
Yeah. RC, we kind of touched on it earlier. Do you actually think that the Commanders could push Eagles or Cowboys in this division? Could they win the division title in 2024?
I'm not saying I didn't place a bet on Washington to win the division at plus 1,000 today on FanDuel. I'm not saying that. I wouldn't place a serious bet. I mean, I was looking at it. I was looking at, at plus 1,000, it's worth some kind of dart throw. It's not one of my favorite long shot bets to plow a lot of money into, but I think it's worth putting a little money on to see what happens.
I mean, with the direction that the Cowboys and Eagles are heading in, that it doesn't shock me. Plus 1,000 definitely is like long odds, and it would be a huge upset. But they could kind of be like what the Texans were last year, where people were counting them out of the division. They have a rookie quarterback coming in, and they had a great draft. And I'm not the biggest Dan Quinn guy, but I think he's an improvement to what they had last year.
He's up against Nick Sirianni and Mike McCarthy. So I like Dan Quinn a lot more in that class.
And one thing Dan Quinn knows how to do is he'll expose the Cowboys defense too. You better believe that like he knows like the coverage schemes, how to bust that coverage too. So I'll be excited to see the first Commanders Cowboys game and see how Dallas adjusts him. Obviously, they're gonna change up their scheme with Zimmer coming in, so it won't be exactly the same. But we'll see what happens. RC, let's move on to the next topic. You wanted to speak about the Rams tight end situation. Obviously, the main headline there is Tyler Higbee. He's not going to be ready to go once the season kicks off, but I think they also grabbed Kobe Parkinson from the Seahawks this offseason. What are you hearing about the tight end room in Los Angeles?
Just a quick note, in the practices, Kobe Parkinson is coming off some type of injury, so he's got a non-contact jersey on when he's playing. But there's a growing buzz of what they saw of Parkinson as a receiver. Everybody thought he's going to be a good blocker and he's going to battle Davis Allen for the tight end snaps. But that's from a media standpoint. They're not really taking Parkinson seriously. But when you look at the contract that Colby Parkinson's got, he's a top 10 paid tight end right now. So the Rams brought him in with a purpose. And I know from scouting him back in his Stanford days, he's a really good receiver. So apparently he's been showing that in the OTAs, which is a good thing. But the excitement is a little tempered by they want to see what happens when he's able to put on the full pads and go. But they thought there was something to him as a receiver, but apparently they're a little more blown away than they thought they were going to be by what a presence he is as a receiver. So you put that with if Stafford has Kupp and Puka and Demarcus Robinson came on strong last year, so they got three really good receivers. Now you give them a good receiving tight end, I think better than Tyler Higbee. This could get really interesting with the Rams offense this year, but I just wanted to give an update on everything. I know a lot of FFMers picked up Parkinson in Dynasty, in deep roster Dynasty, because we've been pointing that out on Parkinson for a couple of months now. But I'm just giving an update that people that are observing their OTAs are starting to see it, and there's a little bit of a buzz growing of like, who the heck is this guy? Or like, now we know why they gave him so much money to come here.
Yeah, you just think about Puka Nacua obviously is going to attract so much more attention in year two, given what he did in his rookie year. Cooper Kupp's going to be healthy, right? So that's going to obviously draw a lot of coverage from the defense. It might leave Parkinson, like I could see Parkinson having a early season surge. Nobody like really paying too much attention to him. He hasn't really, I mean, he's had some success with Seattle, but I don't think he's really had any crazy game. I don't know if he's had a 100-yard receiving game.
He was in a like a tight end rotation with Pete Carroll. Would have him and Fant and Disley and others. They would rotate him out, and a lot of their offense was not predicated on throwing to the tight end. They wanted the tight ends blocking, so Noah Fant went to waste, Colby Parkinson went to waste, and they'd have good games from time to time, but they were only playing half the snaps because they were all rotating in and out. So this could be Parkinson's shot to be a lead tight end. They're paying him like that for sure. And I think Noah Fant's going to benefit from that too in Seattle. But I'm just reporting in that so far so good, and even better reports from Colby Parkinson land.
Exciting to hear. Well, last three topics, RC, we're on NFC teams. Let's shift gears. Let's move to the AFC, where you want to talk about the Patriots wide receiver room. Obviously, this year they drafted Drake May, 3 overall. I think they also have Jacoby Brissett back in New England, who he's probably going to open up as the starter. RC, are you hearing that he's favoring a receiver on the Patriots?
I think Brissett's definitely starting. This is definitely his team, and he's only going to give it up if they fall hopelessly out of the race and they start to decide to go ahead and let Drake May start taking his bumps and bruises. As long as New England is viable, this is Jacoby Brissett's team. And if Jacoby Brissett keeps them viable up to the end of the season, like if they pull off some kind of 8-9 season where the last 3 weeks they're a game out of the wild card and all that, it's going to be Jacoby Brissett all of the way. But then if somehow Brissett leads them to an 8-9 surprise or a 9-8, or if he even sneaks them into the wild card, they will let Jacoby. There's enough respect for Jacoby Brissett where they will let him have this job. I don't know that they're going to force Drake May into the situation because there's so much respect there for Brissett, who used to play there during the Super Bowl run. He was with the Patriots. But I can't see the Patriots having that kind of season. But be that as it may, it's definitely going to be Brissett as the starter, which will probably be good for at least half the season. And scouting Brissett's recent work in Cleveland and New England or Washington, he's viable. He deserves to be a starter in the NFL. Kind of like a Geno Smith story of he just stuck with it and kept grinding and kept learning and kept improving, and all of a sudden he's a good quarterback. His numbers prove that out. His brief flashes last year in for failing Sam Howell were almost electric in coming back against the Rams and the Jets, who were two of the better defenses in the league, and he would come in down by 3 or 4 scores, and he almost came back and beat the Rams, and he did come back and got the lead against the Jets, and then the Jets hit a last-second field goal to win it. But all that to say, that's not my main note about this. I'm just here to note that there's been a lot of Javon Baker talk about how good that rookie wide receiver has looked in the early OTAs. But my sources are here to report that it's Jalen Polk that's starting to rise, that Jalen Polk is starting to look like the real deal, and that Javon Baker's flashy on some catches when they're doing basic drills, and he is a good catcher of the ball. He can make a lot of acrobatic catches, but that the real wide receiver is Jalen Polk. And when I heard that, I was like, okay, I can see that. That's fine. That's a nice note because I hadn't heard his name much. I've been hearing so much Javon Baker, Javon Baker, Javon Baker. But when my source was telling me that, like, you don't understand, Darcy, like, Jalen Polk was kind of quiet to start. He wasn't doing bad, but he wasn't doing exciting things like Javon Baker was to get attention. He's more of a quiet professional receiver. He said, but his recent rise, like as the practices go, you could see that Polk's kind of standing out more and more. He said, but one of his recent practices open to the media, I think, Polk was burning Christian Gonzalez. And when I heard that, I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Hold on a second. Like, I don't care if that's 7-on-7 or 11-on-11. If I hear that you're beating Christian Gonzalez, either he's not rehabbed back from his injury or maybe you got a little something. So my radar is a little bit more up on Jalen Polk, who I think is a very solid wide receiver, but I didn't think he would be special, and he's not in a special place with New England's passing game per se, but I got to say, it got my attention when I heard he was starting to burn Christian Gonzalez. So just wanted to share that piece of info.
And for those of you that don't remember Christian Gonzalez, he was taken 16th overall in the 2023 draft. He was the Patriots' first-round pick. He got injured in the I think in the early part of the season. He was doing really well.
Game, I think.
And RC, I don't know if you remember this, but Tyreek Hill went out of his way, and he's not that type of guy to go and compliment opposite like corners. He went out of his way to like praise Christian Gonzalez. So when I hear that Polk is getting the better of CG this early, that definitely like has my attention.
Outside of the quarterbacks, the two best players from last year's draft were Christian Gonzalez and DeJuan Jones. And it's crazy to me how many teams passed up on the opportunity to get either of them. Gonzalez went, I thought he might go as high as 5. He ended up going like 16 or 18 to the Patriots.
If Detroit just had him, man.
Yeah.
They just needed a corner before. Just like that.
I would, if I was the GM of the Lions, that would keep me up at night.
I mean, he did get injured, right? But like, we don't know if he would have been injured as a member of the Lions. Yeah. Okay. Last note before we switch over to the questions, which I'm sure that chat's going to be excited about. RC, you want to talk about an Indianapolis tight end, Jelani Woods, someone that you've pushed for in the past. He's super athletic, tall, big, fast, and are you seeing anything to suggest that him and Anthony Richardson could potentially have something cooking there?
Definitely so, but my main reason for bringing up Jelani Woods as a topic is to give an alert, to give a fair warning to everybody that's going to be doing mock drafts during the summer, preparing for their July or August drafts, or if you're doing best balls right now before your redrafts come up. I'm here to predict that of all the guys, I mean, there's a lot of players that'll be talked about, the rookies and some of the obvious players, but of the non-obvious players, guys who've kind of fallen off the radar, I think when the media gets back to work in like late July, August, and they start writing their fantasy articles and all that of who their sleepers are and all that, I think it's going to be the summer of Jelani Woods, of the players who are kind of off the grid, that everybody's going to start claiming as their super secret sleeper that only they know about, that there's going to be like every other article of the 5 sleepers, the 10 sleepers for 2024, or deep sleepers. It's not a sleeper. He's going to be a deep sleeper. It's going to be the summer of Jelani Woods. He supposedly is destroying OTAs, and Shane Steichen can't believe it. Every time I see some press conference notes, he's talking about Jelani like he Superman fell to earth and landed in his lap, because he didn't see him play at all. He got hired as a coach, as their coach last year, and then Jelani had a hamstring issue and couldn't participate in OTAs. Then he injured his other hamstring. He had 2 hamstring injuries, and that ended up keeping him out for the entire year. So Steichen never really saw him play live in front of his face. And then all of a sudden, Jelani's like a workout beast. He's in great shape. He came into camp, and apparently he is just ripping it up. And Shane Steichen is like, his eyes are popping out of his head. There's the guy that Steichen is talking about the most times 10 is Jelani Woods. That's going to get picked up on. It's already starting to slowly. That's going to get picked up on in the mainstream. So I'm just here to report it's going to be the summer of Jelani, which those of you that drafted Jelani with us a couple years ago in that infamous draft where we got Jelani Woods, and then in like the 3rd round, then a couple rounds later, we got a guy by the name of Isaiah Pacheco that nobody cared about. So obviously Pacheco has hit, and other guys from that draft, Rashad White and all, have hit. This is, I think Jelani's going to turn the trick this year, and that's going to make that draft that was already spectacular even better. But just know, whatever ADPs he's showing on whatever your best ball drafting or mock drafting is going to be much higher when we get towards August and we start to get towards the real redrafts, there's going to be a Jelani Woods buzz. I don't think they're going to put him all the way up to be like being a tight end one. I'm just saying, if you're thinking, one of my last picks in the redraft might be a Jelani Woods flyer pick, he might not be. There might be other people on that same vibe all of a sudden.
As
I wanted him
impressive.
to stay quiet, but I also I'd rather, on one hand, I'm like, I wish this would stay quiet, but on the other hand, we needed him to show how good he is so that it wasn't quiet. So I'm kind of more excited about him not being quiet because it means we're all on the right track. So just note, it's going to take more juice to get him in upcoming drafts as we get closer to August. I think he's going to be the buzz deep sleeper of the year.
And one note before we get into the questions: as impressive as the Texans were last year, obviously they shocked us. They won the division. They even won a playoff game against the surging Browns. The Colts are right there, and they were right there with Gardner Minshew. If Anthony Richardson, who in his first 5 games looked like the most electric rookie quarterback that we've seen in a while, stays healthy, I have high hopes for this Colts team. I think they're going to be people aren't low on them, but I don't think people understand just
They're
how
not high
good that
enough
this
on
team
them.
can be. Yeah, they're not high enough. Exactly.
When we did the computer simulation season, Houston had the best record at the AFC, was the 1 seed, but Indianapolis tied with them. Houston won the division on a tiebreaker over Indy and made them a wild card in our computer simulation. But they were a wild card that arguably had the second best record in the AFC in our simulation. So those two teams are monsters this year.
Yeah, and you just think about the improvements from last year. They obviously get Latu, best pass rusher in the draft, and obviously Anthony Richardson being healthy. So we'll see what happens. RC, I think it's time to go into the chat. We'll start
All
with
right.
Mark Faria's question at the top. 10-man half PPR dynasty league. He has the 1.03 and some third round picks. He can't find anyone who will give him anything close to fair value for the 1.03. What should I do with it? Rome, Lad McConkey, Trey Benson, someone else. Thanks.
I will assume that the 1 and 2 will be Harrison and Neighbors, and that it won't be Caleb Williams. You'd hope maybe somebody jump up and get too excited and take Caleb Williams and leave you with Neighbors at number 3. If that happens for some reason, then jump on Malik Neighbors. But if you're stuck with that pick in the end, I don't think, me personally, I don't think you have to take Rome Odunze because I don't think there's enough trade value there. People are starting to get wise to the, hey, wait a minute. There's 3 wide receivers that are really good in Chicago, and this is a rookie quarterback. How good is this going to be? What's the future going to be? Is he really going to be over DJ Moore? All of a sudden, there's questions. So, once you get past unquestionable Marvin Harris, unquestionable for them, not for me, unquestionable Malik Neighbors for everybody. Once you get past those 2, then trying to pick somebody slick at 3 and trade them, it's not there with the Dunzier anymore. It's too much of a reach in a 10-man regular everything else to take Caleb Williams to try to trade him. So if you're stuck making that pick, I say you make that pick the way you want it to go, even if it's going to be, the dreaded 5 spots ahead of where they're supposed to go. I would rather have McConkey than a Dunzier for fantasy football for sure. So if I'm at the 103 and I need wide receiver help, or I'm just looking at the best player available, I'd be fine taking McConkey there. yeah, you can kick yourself and go, man, I would like to trade back. And if I traded back to the 107, I might get McConkey. More and more, I'm hearing from people in their dynasty rookie drafts that kind of are sitting because they had a good season last year. They're sitting at the end of the first round and going, "Oh man, I can't wait to get McConkey," and they're not getting McConkey. Everybody's starting to get onto the Lad McConkey train. So, um, if he's figure he would have probably gone fifth, sixth, seventh anyway. So you taking him at the third is not a crime. Um, Somebody will have some smart aleck comment about it, but they always do. So if you like Lad, take Lad. If you're dying for running backs on your team, like if you're loaded at wide receiver and you're like, I'm dying at running back, it's an even more of a stretch to take Brooks or especially Benson. But if you're dying at running back, Brooks is going to be the main starter right away. So Benson will probably be a split starter and not really take off until a year from now. So if you can hack that, if a running back's important enough to you, and you like Benson over Brooks, if it's not an issue about who's going to give me a return on investment right away, you can take Benson up that high. That will definitely get the laughs, but what are you going to do if you can't trade it? If nobody's willing to trade for it, you got to take what you like, and I think it's fair game definitely to take Lad. Fair game to definitely. I see Lad going 3 in places. I see Brooks going in 3 places for people that need running backs. Benson, I don't see going up that high, but he should be worthy. Like if James Conner retired from football tomorrow, Benson would all of a sudden be right up there with Brooks and be up in the top 5 or 6. So if you can't deal it and fall back, and get a 6 or a 7 in some minor deal or something, pick who you want of the Lad Benson group. I mean, if you're way big into a Dunzier, the guy's talented. I just don't like the situation, and the Lad situation is perfect.
Yeah. I mean, you can't ask for a better situation than that. He's the most talented wide receiver on his team. So, and he's going to have
all the reports from OTAs and everything is that he's the number 1 target for Herbert. So, I mean, it's all coming together. Adunzier is doing fine in OTAs, but Caleb Williams is a problem. And then Allen's getting targeted. And then DJ Moore is always there. You don't have any of that with the Chargers. It is all Herbert to McConkey. So, to me, he's third in the pecking order. So he's probably who I would take 3. But if you're desperate at running back, you may need to get into the Brooks Benson pool.
Next question from Keep Matriculating. Conceding you're not a fan of Daniel Jones or Drew Lock, does Tommy DeVito realistically have any shot of starting this year or in the future? I'm considering adding him as a number 5 QB in a Superflex dynasty.
Let's come back to that. Can we go to I'm trying to take them in order, so I don't get jumbled up. Let me do the first Keep Matriculating note real quick.
Sure.
Thanks so much for the daily RC notes. They're precisely what I've craved the past few off seasons and considered requesting but never did. Truly appreciate the nuggets. Yeah, I added that this year. Appreciate you commenting on that and enjoying it. It takes time to put that out, just like everything does. But and I used to do like a once a week type of best of my rumors, and then we're talking about rumors and nuggets on video. But I'm trying to put them in the notes as well, just so that every day when everybody wakes up or first gets to work or whatever, they can know that on the site there's going to be some kind of talk, some creative, clever talk, some rumors, some interesting twists, some whatever to start the day. So glad you're enjoying it. As soon as I get the draft guide locked in, I will tell you this is upcoming on FFM. As soon as I get the draft guide locked in and get to a more normal June, July schedule with the draft guide, with the first version of the draft guide behind me, then I'll just be updating it and adding to it all summer. But it won't be as hardcore of a work crunch. Coming up on RC Notes. Get ready. You never know when it's going to hit. My TV show recommendations for the summer. Because I have been binging a bunch of shows in the background as I'm working on some things that I don't have to think about, but I need some background going on. I have found this year a show out of nowhere, a TV show that's one of the best TV shows I've ever seen. I didn't see it coming. I don't know why. Well, now I know why Netflix had it as a good net match for me. People that I talked to and said, hey, have you seen this? They have no idea it even existed. I didn't even know it existed. When I give that recommendation, and if you partake, you're going to be stunned how good this show is. And I've watched several, so I'm going to give my reviews. There's going to be like a 10-day stretch where one a day I'm going to tell you about, just briefly, about a series that I watched and how awful or how good it was. But I've stumbled upon a great one, and I think everybody's going to enjoy it.
I'm looking forward to that, RC. I could use something to distract me this off season.
This will distract you. I've had to set this show aside because it was starting to distract me from, I'm like, you know what? I can probably crunch a lot more Seattle Seahawks study later if I just watch one more episode of this show. Like, if I get into that, like, A, it's a good show, but B, it's bad because it's taking me away from my work focus. So, yes, RC Notes will go on through the summer, and then they'll drop off once we hit the preseason. It'll be all about the preseason games, scouting and reporting on the preseason games and everything else that comes with it. Then
Awesome.
Keep Matriculating has a second question before that player question. If I could make two requests now, they'd be to one, provide a rankings charts for Superflex. I'm working on that, and I'm hoping that when the draft guide debuts, Superflex valuations are going to debut. And then secondly, include DE, DT, and CBS columns for the weekly IDP projections during the season. Okay, I'll note that. I thought that was on there, but obviously it wasn't. So I'm mad at myself for not realizing that was the case. So I have written it down. And if you don't see it, please say it again. Remind me. I am bad at administration if I don't do it when the season hits. All right, now, Andrew, the question. Can you repropose the question?
So, conceding you're not a fan of Daniel Jones or Drew Lock, does Tommy DeVito realistically have any shot of starting this year or in the future? I'm considering adding him as a number 5 QB in Superflex Dynasty.
My first question would be, who is the alternative? Who else are you looking at for a number 5 QB, just so I can get an idea of who might be, if there's a better number 5 to look at. But specifically to the question on the Giants, Daniel Jones is going to get every chance there is to be the starter. But if it goes bad, I don't know what Brian Daboll's going to do. I think if it goes bad, Brian Daboll's just going to stick with Daniel Jones and go down the tubes. He's going to be obstinate and tie himself to Daniel Jones. But it's very possible that Daniel Jones really fails, and if the Giants start out 0-5, the Giants have an easy, I should say easy, a favorable first 2 games, so they might actually get out of the gates with a win. But if they go 1-5, 1-6, and the team looks horrible, Daboll could get run out by mid-season, and that could come with a Daniel Jones benching because there's no reason to keep continuing to play him. But then there'll be no reason to play Drew Lock either, because who the hell cares? The fans are going to want Tommy DeVito mania like they wanted last year. And I thought Tommy DeVito looked really good in his thrown into situation. I was shocked how good Tommy DeVito looked. I'm a Tommy DeVito fan. I don't think he's ready to be C.J. Stroud and Will Levis and all those guys. But I think if I was the coach of the Giants, and I wasn't worried about getting fired, 3 weeks into the season, I would be taking DeVito a lot more seriously to try to go ahead and win this job. I think Tommy DeVito may be such a douchebag off the field, so cocky that Brian Daboll doesn't like it, and Brian Daboll would rather have yes sir, no sir Daniel Jones, and maybe rightfully so, because DeVito is a bit of a loose cannon with that weird agent that's always around him and all that. I mean, I get that there's some problems that come with DeVito acting up and doing the finger gestures and all that. However, the fans love him, and he showed real talent. He's the best looking Giants quarterback versus Daniel Jones. I mean, if you go back and look at Daniel Jones's game logs of the 5 or 6 games he played, this is a disaster. I mean, we already know he's bad, but it was worse than I even remembered. So Daniel Jones is terrible. Tyrod Taylor was a good quarterback, but I thought DeVito came in and played just as well and gave the team a different spark. But he may be such a D-bag that he's never going to get in there as long as Dayball's in there, and maybe whoever takes over for Dayball, if that happens, they ain't going to like him either. But when somebody takes over for Dayball, it's going to mean Daniel Jones failed, and Drew Lock is nothing. So we could see DeVito. And then if DeVito does get his shot, to just further your notion, if DeVito gets his shot and is good, maybe he's going to have a chance to be the quarterback there. He's got more of a shot here than, you picked some other places where he would be dead and buried at. So there's a path for him here. So I'm definitely not against him at all as a number 5 in Superflex Dynasty. Not at all.
Moving on to the next question, RC. Vincent Langkamp. What's your outlook on Jordan Addison with the QB changes in Minnesota? He's considering selling him in a 14-team half PPR for Michael Wilson plus another piece, something of that type of deal. Do you think that's too little for Jordan Addison?
I think it is. I am for selling everything Minnesota-based except for Ty Chandler and Justin Jefferson, and then I'm worried about what's going to happen to Justin Jefferson. So I would consider moving him if I got a great exchange. But Justin Jefferson is as good as it gets, so I don't want to sell him short. But I do not like this situation at quarterback. It's going to take down Addison. It's going to take down TJ Hawkinson. It's going to take down Aaron Jones. And when they start out 0-4, 0-5, 1-7, then Aaron Jones is going to be irrelevant. TJ Hawkinson shouldn't rush himself back for this mess from his ACL. So I am all for trading Addison. I wouldn't trade for Michael Wilson because as much as I love Michael Wilson, I don't know how Arizona is going to treat him with Marvin Harrison. I want to acquire Michael Wilson in general because he's so cheap, and I think he can be the number 1 for Arizona, even with Marvin Harrison there. If Marvin Harrison gets exposed as being more average than great, or just there's so much attention that's going to be on Marvin Harrison from the defense, Michael Wilson is going to be able to go nuts potentially. But I don't think I just know from my NFL time that Jalen Warren doesn't get past Najee Harris. So Michael Wilson isn't going to get past Marvin Harrison for production. So I'd like to take a shot. I'm still holding on to Michael Wilson and hoping, but I wouldn't want to make him the cornerstone of a deal for Addison. You can get more. People still really believe in Addison, and they like J.J. McCarthy. So you can get something good for Addison. But, yeah, I would get out of Addison, Hawkinson, and Aaron Jones high while you could.
Yeah, so long story short, trade Addison but get more than just Wilson because his value is probably higher than that.
Yeah, and he has the plus a piece or something. It needs to be the piece or the something needs to be the headline get, and then Michael Wilson's a throw in.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, next question. The gaming analyst. Any scouting reports coming in for Lad McConkey and or Troy Fitanu? RC, I think you released it for Lad McConkey during the draft. I don't know if you did one for Fitanu though.
Oh yeah, McConkey's one of the early scouting reports out there. So if you do a search, an inner site search for McConkey's full name, all the anywhere where we've referenced or did something with McConkey will come up in the search, and you can do refined searches from there and get to it. But you should find it through a basic Lad McConkey search. No, didn't do anything on Fitanu. It's possible. I've got a slate of names of scouting reports to do. I'll start doing. There'll be more scouting reports coming out once the draft guide is complete, and then I'm just maintaining and adding to it weekly. But the hardcore work will have been done, so I'll be doing more scouting reports.
Yeah.
The rest of the summer for June and July.
Man, Pittsburgh dodged a bullet. They could have been the one with Mims, but they get Fitanu and Frazier, something that Cincinnati could have potentially used.
Yep.
Okay, Tim M. So running back Allen from the New York Jets looking good with catching the ball. What are your projections on him this year? I've been getting him in the third round of standard dynasty drafts. Is he this year's Pacheco?
He's not this year's Pacheco because when Pacheco came in, it was a perfect storm of knowing and scouting that Clyde Edwards-Helaire sucked when everybody else thought he was great. So we were going to go in on Pacheco anyway for the value, but then when Pacheco started catching some heat in the mainstream, you had to be willing to bet against Clyde Edwards-Helaire, which people weren't that willing to do. So the Pacheco thing was just perfect time and place. And Pacheco's super talented, so it was only a matter of time. It was just way faster than I thought it was going to happen. Braylon Allen can look spectacular, and he is not going to just dispatch Breece Hall into the upside down world. It's still going to be Breece Hall's game. If anything, you can draft Braylon Allen and then hope that something happens with Breece Hall. If Breece Hall goes down, Braylon Allen will get launched, and there'll be a real running back controversy. But when Breece Hall is healthy and active and there's no way Braylon Allen is going to be force his way into becoming the starter and put Breece Hall on the bench like Pacheco did to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So I'm more the whole Braylon Allen thing. Every time it comes up, couple different thoughts. Like, man, if he would have just landed in a better place, he could take over. He could have taken over in Pittsburgh. He could have taken over in a number of places. He could have been Dallas's number. He would have been. If Braylon Allen would have got drafted by the Cowboys, he'd be a top 12 to 15 dynasty pick. There's so many places he could have gone that would have launched him to greatness. Then my next thought is, thank God the Tampa Bay Buccaneers passed on him when they could have drafted him and drafted freaking Bucky Irving instead. I am so thankful the Buccaneers did that. I would have been scared to death for all of my Rachaad White, or if the Chiefs had drafted. Braylon Allen had fallen far enough that anybody could have taken him, and it would have ruined a whole lot of backfields. So that leads to my third thought is I'm not excited about what Braylon Allen is going to do this season or even next season because of Breece Hall, but I'm more afraid if I own Breece Hall, I am pissed that Braylon Allen is sitting behind him, because you got like Rachaad White, who's got Bucky Irving sitting behind them, but you got Breece Hall with one of the 30 best running backs walking the planet, Braylon Allen, sitting behind him. That's a big difference. So I'm all for sitting on and getting Braylon Allen stock, but it's got a big blockage with Brees Hall.
Is he the clear-cut handcuff to Brees Hall?
Yes,
Okay.
no doubt.
That's
Not one
useful.
doubt. Isaiah Davis is doing well. I think Isaiah Davis is doing well and is probably going to make the team, and they'll trade or cut. And when I say trade, like giveaway trade, Israel Abanikanda, who's not bad, but Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis are just that much better.
Okay. Next comment from me too. Pats plus 2,700 to win the AFC East on FanDuel. I mean, those are long odds, RC, but I don't think you or I are seriously considering them to take that division. A whole lot would need to go wrong with the other teams there, and I just don't trust. Even if Brissett looks good, I don't trust Mayo as a coach to help them like oust the Jets or the Bills or even the Dolphins. In that
2 months
matter.
ago, 2 months ago, I would have said, I don't know if the Patriots are going to win a game this year. After doing more study for the draft guide and spending a day and then some going through the Patriots personnel and doing the extra study on Jacoby Brissett and all that, I started going, if Christian Gonzalez is back 100%, if Miami's a fraud and if Buffalo's going to be a little sloppy because they lost so much veteran influence, and then that leaves the Jets, but what if Aaron Rodgers goes down? Like I started talking myself into, the Patriots maybe, if this division is won with a 9-8 record, but there's so many ifs to get there, and the Patriots just aren't. The key thing I think for the Patriots of not wanting to waste your buck or 10 or whatever on plus 2,700 is they lost Trenton Brown, so an already shaky offensive line loses their best offensive lineman, one of their best offensive linemen. But then probably their best offensive lineman was the offensive guard Cole Strange, and he's already out. He may be out for the season. He is one of the early injuries of OTAs that has a real influence. That's a huge loss. So the Patriots have lost arguably their two of their best or their two best offensive linemen from last year have already been lost to start this year. That on top of having a talent deficit compared to the rest of the division, I just don't see it possible. I would say if Belichick was coaching, maybe I'd believe that he'd have a trick up his sleeve, but to Andrew's point, I don't know that Gerard Mayo's got a trick up his sleeve. Not one that I want to bet on.
RC, I missed the news on Strange. I didn't know that the injury was that serious. With that being said, does that make you downgrade Ramondre Stevenson too this year?
Yeah, I would downgrade him just because A, he hasn't really been that productive. B, the offensive line is crumbling. But I upgraded him a little bit this week on the news that they're going to give him a preemptive contract extension. Whatever we think of Ramondre Stevenson, he's their guy.
And no Zeke.
So, I want to see what that contract looks like because they have Antonio Gibson, but I don't think from the reports, and I was able to watch some of the rotations for the Patriots in one of their practices. Stevenson's running as the number one, and Antonio Gibson's kind of fluttering around between the first and second team quarterbacks and being like a third down guy and all that. I just don't think Stevenson is all that great. So, but he is the guy. And maybe if they're going to lose a bunch of games, he's going to get a bunch, like Ezekiel Elliott did at the end of last year, get a bunch of catches because he's a good receiving back. I mean, he's solid enough. He's just not that special. And with the offensive line falling apart, and if the team goes down the tubes and then they go to Drake May for help, I mean, there's a lot of headwinds on Ramondre Stevenson.
All right. Keep matriculating. Do you prefer Andre crap, I can't enunciate that.
Osivas.
Osivas.
It took me 6 months to figure out in my brain how to say that correctly.
Osivas. That's not too bad. Just ignore the I. Or Charlie Jones, and will either matter on Cincinnati, considering they're supposedly competing with Trenton Irwin and Jermaine Burton for playing time, let alone Jamar Chase and T. Higgins.
I'm thinking neither will matter if they can get to that starting slot because Tyler Boyd was more experienced than those guys, and he didn't matter when Chase and Higgins were starting. So then we don't even know if they're going to get to starting. I was into Yossi Voss when I thought T. Higgins was going to be gone, but every day we march on, it looks like T. Higgins is going to be back. So I would have, if Josivas would have been the number two, if Josivas goes in for T. Higgins, if I see T. Higgins traded, I guess I'll put it this way: if T. Higgins does get traded tomorrow, I want in on Josivas. Until then, I'm not really interested in any of these guys. It could be Trenton Irwin starting in the slot. It may be Jermaine Burton. Josivas is not a slot guy. So they could put Chase, they could call him more of a slot, but I think they like to do Chase all over, T. Higgins as a traditional flanker, outside wide receiver, and they want that number 3 to be more slottish, like Charlie Jones or Trenton Irwin or maybe Burton, not Josivas, but Josivas could impress so much that he plays a lot as like a number 4. He plays, equal snaps with Charlie Jones, or he plays equal snaps with Burton, or all 4 of those guys just end up rotating. As long as Chase and Higgins are alive, they're all that matter. Everybody else is a random bye-week fill-in flyer.
RC, what about Gesicki? You think he's going to do anything?
I'm not buying any of the Gesicki stuff. If they are serious about Gesicki and they're going to really push him, and they always rotate their tight ends around with Sample and Hudson. Plus, they drafted 2 tight ends. If they're really serious about Gesicki, then I feel even worse about what the Bengals are doing to themselves.
Yeah, they definitely don't seem like they're heading down the right path with the personnel and draft moves. But let's move on to the next question. Joe Schmo, this one's a comment. Lots of chatter about Anthony Richardson's soreness, which is kind of annoying. Yeah, it would suck if something happens to Anthony Richardson in the offseason. I'm really excited to see what he does in 2024. RC, is that concerning to you, whatever Anthony Richardson is dealing with?
No, I'm not concerned at this point because he's been fully cleared. He's already out throwing. This is like when Brock Purdy had that major elbow surgery and he got back last year, and there were days where it was sore and everybody was like, oh my goodness, how is Purdy going to come back from this injury? I was even like, how is Purdy going to come back from that so quickly? And everybody was watching, getting a medical check on him with intent of, how's your elbow feel today? And if he said it was sore, everybody would freak out. But the Brock Purdy in me says this is going to be fine. The Joe Burrow in me, that when the calf injury happened, I was like, who cares about a calf injury? That ain't going to affect him. So I don't want to be totally dismissive, but Richardson says it's not a problem. He's been cleared by the medical staff. He's already throwing. Like, if he wasn't participating in OTAs and he was just throwing lightly on the sidelines and reporting in soreness, I might be like, oh no. But he's fully participating, and he's reporting in a little bit of soreness, which would make sense. You have guys with clean bills of health that didn't have surgery last year that have sore arms.
And then moving to his question, shoulders. Do you buy that the Steelers are trying to bring in another wide receiver? Is Roman Wilson the favorite to be the second wide receiver opposite of Pickens?
I don't trust anything the Steelers are trying to do. So as of right now, I would say Roman Wilson is the number 2 wide receiver. Give me a break with this Van Jefferson stuff that's popping up. And Van Jefferson blows. So yeah, I'm sure they're looking for another wide receiver to bring in, upgrade, because it'd be Calvin Austin right now. If the season was starting now, it would be Pickens 1, Roman 2, Calvin Austin 3, but then probably Pat Freiermuth would be maybe the second most targeted guy. So the Roman Wilson era of greatness may happen this year if they don't bring in another wide receiver. But if all of a sudden they trade for Ayuk, then this whole the board flips and Roman gets downgraded, then we got issues with Roman.
I can't see
So
Arthur
I do
Smith.
think they are trying to bring in another wide receiver, but I think if they were really going to bring in somebody seriously, it would have been Ayuk, and it would have already happened by now.
RC, the second wide receiver in a Arthur Smith offense, even if it is, I mean, Ayuk and Debo were the ones that were getting rumored there, right? Like,
Hmm.
I know they're excellent receivers, but like in an Arthur Smith offense, I'm not really excited about Pickens, or even if Ayuk or Debo were there, like they're probably not going to get a lot of targets, so it's going to be a run heavy offense.
I'm not excited about Pickens per se in that offense, given Russell Wilson and everything. I mean, there's a ton of headwinds, but I could see Roman Wilson being the scared dump pass throw for Russell Wilson, um, and him getting a good amount of targets and being able to do some things with it. Wilson's also the kind of guy that Arthur Smith likes. When he calls this pass play and you are going to throw that pass play, Roman Wilson can get open on everybody. George Pickens is not that type of wide receiver. George Pickens is more downfield, throw it up to me and I'll make a play. Roman Wilson is, you want me to run a route to a certain spot, I'm going to do it and I'm going to get open because corners can't make the cuts with me. So we can make the simple throws all day long together. I think that's the Roman Wilson upside. But if they bring in Ayuk, then everything changes.
I personally think the philosophy of Arthur Smith and where Russell Wilson is in his career, I think it's a good marriage. You just don't trust it for receiving output in fantasy week to week. But
Yeah, I'm not I don't want to bet heavily on it. I like the future is bright for Roman,
yeah,
but
yeah.
do I the base question is, do I buy that they're trying to bring in one? Yes, but I think it's a big swing other wide receiver, and I don't know that they're going to be able to pull it off.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Follow up from keep matriculating, I think going back to the first question. To answer your question, I'm considering adding DeVito at the expense of a deep depth running back like Chris Rodriguez.
And this is super flex, so it makes sense to do DeVito over a Chris Rodriguez,
Okay.
unless for some reason the league is so big and you have Eckler Robinson and you need to keep some continuity there. Um, that would be the only reason. Maybe it isn't Chris Rodriguez, but outside of that, in Superflex, I'm always deep roster Superflex where you have number five quarterbacks. Yeah, give me DeVito, give me Zach Wills, give me whoever it is you want to take a shot on. You can't have enough quarterback lottery tickets in Superflex.
Next question. Mike Rogers Jr., 12 team PPR dynasty, won the league last year, awesome, but was looking for wide receiver depth. I traded Luke Musgrave, tight end from the Packers, straight up for Luke McCaffrey, rookie wide receiver of Commanders. I have Pitts and Jelani Woods at tight end. What are your thoughts?
If I was posed, no matter what my roster situation, well, I shouldn't say that. If I was light on tight ends, I'd be really not looking to move Musgrave. But that aside, all things being equal, if I had to make a bet on who's going to be better for fantasy from here on in, Musgrave or Luke McCaffrey, I'd rather have Luke McCaffrey. And I love Musgrave, but that situation in Green Bay is going to be a nightmare to try to get targets from. They have so many wide receivers to throw to. And I think Luke McCaffrey could be the Washington number one wide receiver as early as this year, but definitely in 2025.
And you have good tight ends. I mean, Pitts should be a tight end. Like he'll push top five tight end scoring, I think, this year. And then you have Jelani Woods, who has all that upside. So I mean, it's not like you're short on tight end talent on your squad. So I like that trade too.
And I don't want my bombastic statement to go by the boards too easily. I think Luke McCaffrey may be better than Terry McLaurin right now.
Oof, man,
But
that is a statement.
Terry McLaurin has the experience and the cachet with the team,
Yeah.
so it's not going to happen this year. But maybe as we get to the end of the year, and if things aren't going well for Washington, you might see McLaurin maybe get traded. But in 2025, things start to shift to where Luke McCaffrey is the preferred target for Jaden Daniels.
Yeah.
I think is very possible. Luke Musgrave is really good, but he's caught in a trap with Green Bay has to be one of the deepest wide receiver groups in the NFL.
And
They
their
have
backup
five
tight end's
legit,
pretty good too.
yeah, they have five legit wide receivers. That's I
Yeah.
don't want to own any of them because it's going to be too maddening to try to pin one down. But for Washington, you got overrated but okay Terry McLaurin. You got John Dotson stinks and isn't a factor. You got old Zach Ertz, who we talked about earlier. But then you got Luke McCaffrey, who's maybe a different but similar, tougher version of Ricky Pearsall.
Next question from Mike Rogers. Have you heard anything new on New York Giants running back Dante Miller? I picked him up in 4 of my dynasty leagues.
I would just point you to, and you probably read the note that I put out a couple days ago about Dante Miller. And Andrew, I don't know if you saw it, but I'll take you through it because I know you know Dante Miller and we're vested in Dante Miller a little bit. But I was watching some random Giants training camp tape because I wanted to see how Malik Neighbors looked in general. So I'm watching it and I'm just letting it play and I'm trying to fast forward to the wide receiver drills. This camera was picking up the quarterbacks throwing to the receivers, but then there was a time that the running backs were coming in and getting passes. So I got a bunch of drills that were playing, and when it wasn't the wide receivers, I was trying to fast forward it to the next wide receiver part of the tape, but I was letting it play, and I just happened to be I think eating a bowl of cereal or something and watching. So my hands were occupied, and all of a sudden it changed from the wide receivers to the running backs going out for passes. So prior to that I had been fast forwarding, but I was too much of a pig. I wasn't going to put down my spoon while I was eating my cereal. I'm like, I'll just let this play through, and as soon as I'm done with this cereal, I'll get back to the fast forwarding. So I hadn't really watched any of the running backs because I'm like, well, there's Devin Singletary, and who cares about everybody else? And this is shorts and t-shirt practice, and they're just doing very basic stuff. So I'm not even thinking anything about Giants running backs. So, but the tape is playing, and all of a sudden, the running backs were coming from out of the backfield set up and coming out and running routes, about 5-yard routes or so, catching the passes and then running forward. No coverage or anything. It was just basic work. But the first running back that showed up on the tape as I was eating my cereal, this guy catches a pass, and I'm looking at him, and I'm like, geez, that guy is ripped. Like, who is that? Like, that's not Devin Singletary. So the guy catches the pass, and he's coming towards the person that was filming. So it's like all of a sudden this player started coming closer and closer, and I'm like, look at the muscles on it. It looked like the Incredible Hulk was coming at me. And I'm like, my first thing in my head was like, that's not Saquon Barkley. Then I'm like, dummy, he's not even on the Giants anymore. Like, that's not Devin Singletary. Like, who could that be? So my head's running through the possibilities. I'm like, is that Eric? Maybe that has to be Eric Gray. He's the only one that I can think of that's kind of, a bigger bodied running back, but they don't really have bigger bodied running backs like that. So I'm sitting there eating and watching, and it started gnawing at me, and I couldn't tell from the jersey. The jersey number was 25, and I'm like, I don't know who that is. And then the player turned around, and they had dreads hanging down. It was blocking their name, so I couldn't see who the name was in a flash. And again, I'm too lazy to put my spoon down. I got to finish my cereal. So I just called out to Alexa. So when I say that, it's probably going to respond. I asked the device, who's number 25 on the New York Giants? And I asked that because I was like blown away by the looks of this running back. I'm like, who is this running back that looks like this for the Giants? And of course, it was Dante Miller, and I was a big smile on my face. I'm like, oh, look at that. And the route, so I rewound it and I was watching it, like it was just a drill, but he looked so good, so smooth coming out of the backfield, but totally ripped. And I'm not talking like he's like a fullback ripped. I'm talking like Austin Eckler type of just all muscle from head to toe, perfect shape. And as he's moving his arms to catch the pass, his biceps were popping, and that made me remember, like, oh yeah, Dante Miller had 28 bench reps at his pro day. Like, he was no joke. Well, his body looks like it could bench 28 reps, and he ran that route real smooth, but it was just against air. So all my latest news on Dante Miller is, man, when I saw the tape of him moving around, it got my attention. Like, this guy definitely looks like he belongs in the NFL. What happens when they put the jerseys on and all that is up for grabs, but he may be the most muscular, toughest back physically that they have on their team, because they don't have a very good group of running back talent. So all of a sudden, my interest in Dante Miller is getting sparked a little bit more than it already was.
Yeah, and if you guys want more information on that, not only go to RC's website, ffmetrics.com, but even on this YouTube channel, we have a scouting report on Miller too, where RC gets in depth about that 28 bench rep and what that means for running backs. But RC, last question of the day from Mike Rogers again, 14-team IDP Dynasty League. I need to drop one linebacker between D. Winters and Chad Muma. What are your thoughts?
I would drop Muma. He's had his chance. Jacksonville has treated him like he doesn't exist, and that he's just like a special teamer and backup linebacker only. I think he's better than that, but there is absolutely no sign that they're treating him that way. D. Winters, everybody raves about him, but the 49ers are stacked at linebacker. You won't probably get a pay. Well, you may get a payoff on Winters if one of those guys was it Greenlaw that got hurt in the Super Bowl?
Yep.
If Greenlaw's not back, you could get some instant action out of D. Winters. But even if it isn't this year, if Greenlaw's back and Winters is just kind of rotating in and out, in the future, you're going to want to have D. Winters, because just think of how those 49ers linebackers, how well they produce for IDP compared to the non-Foyer linebackers in Jacksonville. So I'm more with D. Winters right now than Muma. I don't think he's dead. I hope he isn't. I wish he'd get a shot, but it doesn't look like he's going to get a fair shake in Jacksonville unless some radical injuries happen.
All right, RC, that wraps up the questions. Before we end the stream, anything else you wanted to relay back to the audience?
What's coming up? Draft guide coming up. We already talked about that. And then once draft guide's over, we'll get into some different things, but I'll start the second half of June. I'll start researching and writing a lot of the Devi reports on the top college prospects for fantasy for next year. The Devi series will start publishing in July, but I start researching it right after the draft guide. So, and again, I don't know that I could name two college players besides Deion Sanders' son, who's not that good. I can already tell. I don't know anybody. I only focus on the college season. After the college season is over, and only the guys who are in the draft. I know rare other few players, so this will be all new to me. When I'm laying my eyes on them, it's going to be all new to me for 99% of the guys I'm about to look at. So I do 60 Devi reports, release them 2 a day in July for the entire month of July, and I'm just putting the list together now of who those golden 60 players or 62 players are going to be that we're going to take a pre-look at.
That's exciting, RC. Looking forward to that. And for everybody else, thank you for tuning in. We'll be back to you maybe sometime next week. Check out RC's site again, ffmetrics.com. And we are